Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. We will be starting shortly. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. CRU reality. What's good with you? You see the topic. You see what type of time we on. I'll do a quick monologue. Frogbox, what's going on with you? We're gonna do a little monologue, and then we're gonna open up the panel for everybody. I'm going to share the link a little bit and make sure. Make sure I don't miss anybody. How's everybody doing this morning? You already know what, CRU. Speak to me. Angel Muniz, what's going on with you? Good morning. Well, it's morning for me. I don't know what time it is where you guys are at. It's 8:50 a.m. where I'm at. Oh, we're gonna talk about it, CRU. Don't you worry. We're gonna talk about it. We are gonna talk about it. You about to go in. Don't even worry about it. Don't even trip. We're just gonna take it slow for a second. There's no rush. We're gonna get to it. I've been at work for 3 hours. Oh, you just getting started. Okay, that's what's up. It's 10:50 a.m. here in Minnesota. Listen, Angel, what's the weather like? That's what I want to know. I know it's got to be like in the what 20s, 10s. There's something crazy out there right now. I know. I know. It's far. Oh, it's 33. 33. I mean, if you want to consider that warm, okay. I wouldn't consider it warm, but if you say so. If you say so. It's no 27 feels like 33. Okay. Okay. Okay, people. Thank you for joining me this morning. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We'll talk a little bit about what's really going on. And again, this is just from my perspective. I don't speak for everybody that's black, nor do I claim to. This is just my perspective. This is my perspective on things. So as you know, Prada was an Italy-based or an Italian origin, a high-end, high-fashion clothing company. They do make other goods. I believe they make leather goods as well. Um, you'll find Prada in standalone Prada stores. You'll find that at some of the other high-end establishments such as Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's, to a certain degree, maybe even Nordstrom, um, Barney's, and they specialize in high-end goods, consumer goods. Rather expensive for my taste, but I can definitely appreciate the quality of some of the merchandise that they put out. So no hate in that regard. But for those that don't know, uh, Prada has recently released a line, and as is the trend for a lot of the upper end fashion manufacturers, uh, Prada is pushing the envelope, and as we saw with Gucci, um, they usually make a fashion line and they center it around a theme. Gucci had made a fashion line and it centered around animals. Saw snakes and tigers and things of that nature. And the clothing itself kind of centered around, that animal theme, and it featured the animal in a lot of the actual clothing items, such as the shirts, even to a certain degree, shoes, and even pants and things of that nature. You would see motifs based around animals. Um, and then that kind of spread to some of the other clothing manufacturers. Some of them, I guess, you would even say emulated or copied Gucci style. So you see even what you would consider lower tier, low end clothing manufacturers now utilizing tigers and different types of motifs on their clothing. Respect to you, Gab Talk Media, and more of an emulation of what Gucci has started. And so Prada essentially tries to push the envelope even more. Uh, this is obviously blackface. There's no doubt about it. We see the imagery. And when we talk about blackface, blackface isn't a new phenomenon. It's been around for quite some time. It is basically a caricature of individuals of African descent. And it became popularized in American theater in the early 1900s. From there, it spread to Europe, in particular Britain. So this particular, I guess I would say, style, um, again, is not new. And I won't say it's particularly old either, because public blackface performances were seen up until the early 1980s. So it hasn't been gone all that long. And again, these were caricatures, so it was intended to accentuate or exaggerate characteristics of African Americans, or perceived characteristics of African Americans, with the extremely dark skin and the contrast of the lips area, exaggerated lips. And it extended not only to the actual visual representation, but some of the activities of the actors on camera, over exaggerated caricatures. And the intent was definitely not to uplift Black people. It was intended to use Black people as comic relief. You show Black people in a negative light, so that way you have something to feel good about, regardless of the situation you may be in. And when we talk about blackface, we typically think of depictions of individuals of African descent by non-blacks. That's what we typically think of it as. And we've seen that actual depictions of blacks as far back as the 1400s. But at that particular time period, it was not a caricature. It was just a simple depiction. So they would have people who would put on makeup to appear to be of West African descent, but it was not a caricature. They weren't trying to exaggerate feature, exaggerate mannerisms. It was just merely uh, an attempt to depict somebody of West African descent without using West African actors. King Hebrew, what's going on with you? Sheep stay sleep. What's up with you? And as I said earlier, for those of you that is joining me, I will be opening up the panel shortly. So stay tuned for that. So when we talk about blackface, we got to remember that people of African American descent perform blackface as well. People of Negroid descent, blacks from all over the world, have performed blackface. It's not something exclusive to white people or non-black people. So we have that. We have had that trend amongst even our own people. For those of you who are black. And so when we talk about the actual Prada blackface, the question then becomes, was it an honest mistake? Was it cultural ignorance? Was it cultural insensitivity? And the reason why I asked that, because again, Prada is based in Italy. Italy doesn't necessarily have the same history that the United States has as far as racism. And blackface didn't have its inception in Italy. It had its inception here in the United States, even though it spread to Britain. Was Prada just pushing the fashion envelope? Were they attempting to invoke a retro vibe and kind of maneuver that into couture? Is that what they were trying to do? Maybe they weren't intentionally trying to antagonize African Americans. Maybe it was just an expression of high fashion. I think that is a distinct possibility, but I also think that there is somebody that worked at Prada that knew this would be considered offensive. Somebody at Prada knew that this would be culturally insensitive. But yet it was still released. Not only was this merchandise released, it was put on display. Soho, New York. Everybody who walked past that establishment saw that. And so now when we talk about blackface, we kind of think about another phenomenon called blackfishing. Is there a difference? For those of you that don't know what blackfishing is, blackfishing refers more to I guess you would consider it a trend of individuals who are not of African American descent or African descent, or individuals who perhaps may even be of African descent, but don't have the African phenotype that we typically associate with individuals of African descent. And so through use of makeup and lighting, perms, weave, wigs, they intentionally accentuate certain features that people tend to associate with being black. Now, their intentions are not to necessarily antagonize African Americans. Perhaps their intentions are to attract somebody of African American descent, or clout chasing to a certain degree. And we see women who engage in what you would consider blackfishing, and they don't necessarily have any intentions of antagonizing Black people, but Black people find it offensive for some people. Should it be grouped in the same category as blackfishing? Or excuse me, blackface? Are those two terms synonymous? Let's take it a step further. Rachel Dolezal, for a certain period in her life, she portrayed herself as an African American woman. It was not until she was, as you would say, outed by certain members of her particular demographic that we then found that Rachel Dolezal was, in fact, of Caucasian descent. Rachel Dolezal was actively involved in the NAACP, a mother of Black children or biracial children, depending on how you perceive them to be. One would imagine that her intent, again, was not to antagonize Black people, but yet she portrayed herself as an African American woman. Now, there is the actual ethical issue of, did she not receive certain benefits that were typically reserved for African American women as a white woman? Did she disenfranchise other African American women by accepting some of those benefits? That's another issue. My question is, if her intention was not necessarily to antagonize or insult Black people, should it be considered blackface? Now, Rachel Dolezal then go to the extent of having extreme coloring with the contrast of the lips, but she did in fact use makeup to make her skin appear darker. There's no doubt about that. Again, not to the degree of what we consider traditionally to be blackface, but the skin darkening is there nonetheless. Is it the same? Is there a difference? And take it a step further, we have individuals within our own community that use blackface imagery. Now, if you are Black and use blackface imagery, is it okay? Similar to using the N-word, because we are the oppressed individuals who are targeted by the imagery or certain terminology, do we then have the right to use it exclusively? Can we say the N-word? Can we use blackface imagery? What about an individual who some will consider to be not all the way Black? Someone who was of biracial lineage. Does that courtesy extend to them? These are all questions that I don't necessarily have the answer for, but perhaps you do. I want to open up the chat at this point. And actually, let's open up the actual panel. Anybody have any input on this? If you would like to discuss this with me, please Go ahead, put your email in the actual chat, and we'll make something happen. We'll get you on here. We can discuss this. I don't have all the answers. I'm gonna be honest with you. Sheep Stay Sleep TV, you have the answers? Is that what you're saying? You're saying you have the answers? Put your email in the chat. We can get you on. We can talk about it. If you want to discuss this, put your email in the chat so I can add you to the Google Hangouts. Gab Talk Media, okay. We'll bring you on. Let's see what we got here. Gab Talk Media. Okay, Sheep Stay Sleep TV, put your email in the chat so I can send you a Google Hangout link. CRU Reality.
Peace, bro.
Gab Talk Media, what's good with you?
Hey, bro, how you doing, man? You was dropping it out up here, man.
Oh man, I'm just trying to shed a little light on the situation because you know what? I really want to be objective.
Okay.
At the same time, I don't want to seem like I'm cooning, but I do want to be objective. And there's certain questions that we need answers to.
Okay.
What do you think? What I said? What do you think about what I've said thus far?
I didn't catch where you stand on the issue of Prada, but I can say really quickly that I don't think that in this time where people are sensitive to how their image is being used, I think it should be respected. Similar to how the Native American felt about the Redskins, the symbol that they use for the team, Washington Redskins. So I feel like with respect to that, that's just a matter of cultural respect for what another culture may be sensitive to if you have respect for them. The issue about whether we can appropriate for ourselves and refer to ourselves as we want, I'm learning that it's pretty individual in nature. So the word nigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still use it sometimes myself. Of course, not to demean us, but kind of in some ways terms of endearment for the people that I mess with. My nigga, that's my nigga. Because I know we understand what that means. I don't think other races or other cultures have a right to use that unless we have given some kind of permission, and whatever that's supposed to look like. So that's kind of personally where I stand at the moment, but I can always be moved with more information.
Okay. So my question then becomes, who is we?
Black people.
No,
Okay.
well, you said when we give permission, but there's so many different factions within the Black diaspora. You have what you would consider pro-blacks. You have what you consider Black first groups. You have what you consider Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam,
Right.
Christian Black.
Okay. Good. That's
So many
good.
different
No,
groups.
that's really good. So in the Nation of Islam, that's not culturally accepted. I don't believe it is for the Hebrew Israelites. They would understand it in a conversation with somebody that's not that, but it's not an accepted part of their culture. So I would not walk into the mosque saying, "What's up, my nigga?" or go into the temple or whatever the Hebrew Israelites call themselves, their places or where they do their work, referring to them as that. So I think that's kind of what it is in hip hop. You know, I heard KRS One say everybody's a nigga in hip hop. I don't really subscribe to that, and I've seen where most of the whites in hip hop that are practicing the art form are not drawn to use the word. So I think where you respect it, where we say you should respect it, and they want to be called by. So yeah, who's means it, you know, respect the word that you use, bro. Respect, man. Wherever you go, is hey, look, respect whatever code that we give you. If you come into this neighborhood right here, that's not accepted. I think you should go on and switch it up real fast. When you go back home to your neighborhood where it's accepted at, you go ahead and practice it if you feel a need to practice it. Now, if you white, my question is, why do you want to practice it? Why do you want to practice calling black people niggas? Like, so that becomes my question in the whole matter. If you're not um, of the culture that word is used by, which we kind of made ourselves the owners of it to a certain degree, to great degrees. And so my question would become anybody that wants to use it that is not of that culture, what, why do you want to do that?
Well, from my perspective and my experience, I was born and raised in Southern California, and I have encountered, personally known, a lot of individuals who are not necessarily black, but I guess were drawn to black culture and primarily associated with black people. There was one particular individual that I remember distinctly. I'll just use this one example because there's many. But this young lady, she was Caucasian, uh, unmistakably Caucasian in phenotypical appearance. She was adopted by a black family. I knew not only her, but I knew her adopted sister. The sister, the family that adopted her, the two girls were around the same age.
Mm-hmm.
This young lady, if you heard her talk on the telephone, you would think she was black. If we'll leave it at that. But if you saw her not talking, you would just assume that you would automatically know, okay, this is a Caucasian woman. But she was the one that started the Black Student Union at my school. There was no Black Student Union before she started it. She initiated it. This was a Caucasian woman or a Caucasian, teenager at the time. And I will remember her using the N-word just in regular conversation with other black people.
You said you do remember her using it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I remember her using the word. I remember her, just talking to other people, her friends in her group, whatever. And, she would just say it like naturally. It wasn't like she was intending to be malicious. It was just part of her conversation.
Yeah. No, I seen white people do that on YouTube. It
And
looked like,
and again, from her particular perspective, she was raised since an infant by a black family. She was adopted as an infant.
Right.
And she was raised by a black family. She started the Black Student Union. So, and then Black History Month, she wore African attire. And this is a white girl. So now we got to ask ourselves, because her behavior was excused by her group, her particular group of individuals that she associated with, does that permission extend to other groups that are considered Black groups, but not necessarily her group? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think first of all, I applaud her work that she did on our behalf, or she might even see it as her behalf. So I applaud that. On the other hand, I understand that if she came up in the Black community where they are in their neighborhood accepting that from her, it's weird to me. If I were her, I would be very careful where I practice that at, and she should be understanding of that. So it's about respect, because wherever in your neighborhood where you know it's understood and accepted, that means that you have some level of respect. Now, she shouldn't think that she can be universal with that as you and I can feel universal with that. There's a separation, bruh.
Oh, okay. So now what you're saying is that in settings outside of your particular group, you should automatically default to the lowest tolerance threshold.
Wait a minute. Say that again so I can understand.
When interacting with individuals outside of your immediate group, as a individual who's not Black, when participating in certain acts or displaying certain mannerisms, using certain terminology that might be perceived as culturally insensitive because you're not Black, you should automatically default to the lowest tolerance threshold. In other words,
she shouldn't use it.
Exactly. Because if there's one individual that may take offense to it, then you should automatically cede to that one individual as an individual, as somebody who's not Black, right?
Yes, for your own safety.
Okay. Or even beyond safety, just out of respect. How about that?
Well, I think it should be out of respect, period. Like, I don't think that should be a choice word for her, even in her community. But sometimes, bro, when you've raised, I seen these white kids on TV. They were saying my nigga like us. It's almost like they admire us and shit. Like it's like they following us. You know what I'm saying? And so it was as natural to them as I heard brothers in my neighborhood. It was natural to them, and these was girls saying it to each other, like in a fighting situation, talking about why you do that, my nigga. You know what I'm saying? So it was like regular. And I'm saying that you might get away with that wherever it is you getting away with it at. You're not getting away with it with me. You're not gonna get away with it with me or nobody I came up with. So I'm saying be smart. That's all I'm saying. I'm not one of them dudes that's like, whatever y'all do around there where you live at, I don't care. But I want respect when you come to, it's like our YouTube channels. You know, everybody should adjust themselves. Like when you enter the room, you say respect. Like that's a big deal to me. I done started using that in certain spaces where I go. And I see that as a universal term now, actually, you know, to use. And so respect, man, and salute was my way of doing it, and peace is my way of doing the same thing. But respect might be a little bit more universal, because I noticed that some people, you know, they don't like peace. They prefer salute, you know. So respect, I think, is something that everybody desires. So I will adjust myself, whatever the chat room prefers. When I go over to somebody who I know is damn near everybody's an Israelite, I'm gonna say shalom. So I adjust myself for that group because I'm in their space. And so I think that is the main thing is respect there. Am I am I good?
Yeah, I totally understand you. Now, what about things that are kind of ambiguous? Like, say, for instance, we have okay, so understandably, we have Prada Blackface, and kind of tie this in. We have two extremes. We have an expression of both examples that you just said. So we have Prada using blackface imagery on their merchandise, right? And we have individuals within the black community who find that insensitive. We also have Jay-Z, a rapper, who used blackface imagery in his Story of OJ animated
Yes.
music video, right? But because he's African American and he's part of that group of oppressed individuals, he
He
has
can
the
use.
latitude to use that while Prada does not.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now when we go to something a little bit more ambiguous, we have individuals who participate in what you would consider black fishing. This is where we have individuals who uh, alter their physical appearance either through makeup, maybe hair weave, maybe taking pictures with certain lighting to give them more of a phenotypically ambiguous or perhaps even an African American appearance. And in distinction between blackface, black fishing doesn't necessarily attempt to caricature black people. It only attempts to emulate black people.
Right.
And because the actual intent of black fishing is different than blackface, black fishing doesn't intend to antagonize African Americans. Should that be considered okay?
Um, I see the point you're trying to make, or the point that's on the table. Um, I have not given this black fishing thing enough thought. Here's my initial thought, just because you bringing it up in the conversation. Uh, the idea that if somebody is admiring my culture, so they go get braids or they do dreads and it is with respect to the culture because you actually like the culture. I don't particularly have a problem with that because the bottom line is you're coming with respect. If you are if you have hidden your identity to extract from my culture, now we're entering another field where I might not have as much respect for your so-called admiration. And so I think again this has to do with the same word, respect. Are you respecting the culture in that you admire what's going on with us? Do you want to be us to the point that you want to migrate into who we are, just like we are cooning to migrate into who they are, to extract, greater benefits as black people. So we sometimes we call it cooning, which is something I don't like all of these titles, by the way. Um, so what I'm saying is that it depends on the intent of the individual. I think a safe practice at this particular time in our history where black folk have not realized, uh, have not established any kind of independence, where we are severely lacking and the only thing we can hold on to is our nuts. I don't want you bothering nothing of that. I don't want you bothering anything of the culture until we are up and running ourselves and on our own. I think that is where this sensitivity lies because not many people uh, necessarily are worry about you emulating their culture when they have established themselves. In our position, we're going to be much more sensitive when we don't control our resources and things of that nature, when we're not great competitors of the world as a nation of people. We're not considered even a nation of people here in North America. So um, that sensitivity alone is to be respected. And if we say, nah, I don't think we care for that, I think anybody should be backing up off of that. And I'm sorry about the background.
No, no, it's okay. I'm glad to have your input on this situation. Um, and again, I don't want to keep the stream going on too long. I just wanted to touch on some of the highlights, but one last thing I wanted to kind of throw in there. Some years back, uh, photographs came up, and I believe it was for some sort of commercial, but it showed Drake, the rapper slash singer, in blackface. And he would, some people considered, he was what some people considered to be cooning, especially in his, not only in his, the black face, but his mannerisms, his posture, in some of the photographs, snapshots that were taken. And the question then becomes, well, Drake is black, but then Drake is biracial. Is he considered black? Is he not? We have yet to define what blackness is as a collective. There is no general consensus. There are people who have their specific ideas, but these ideas they're not concrete. And people tend to, as they say, move the goal line when it's convenient, when we're referring to what blackness is. Because if you have somebody who, say, for instance, is black, and they have a child with somebody who's not black, then that child has a child with somebody who isn't black. And then that child has a child by somebody who isn't black. At what point are they no longer considered black? Are they considered black when they cease to identify as being black? Do they cease to be black when they no longer display the phenotypical characteristics of being black?
Yeah, at some point, I think it can become how they self-identify, and then they're going to have to prove to some extent that that's really what it is, and that it's not a matter of that they're using at their convenience. And so this stuff is going to be really, really difficult, which at some point um, we're going to realize that it's not truly the color that it matters, but I think we're not to move on that too fast, because right now it is expressly color that is mattering. And those of us who don't like to practice racism or some kind of racist sentiment about in our behavior, and we respect the other cultures, we are in a small we're in a small number right now. So I don't think we should be moving too fast to force the world to not see race as an issue. Until I'm not willing to do that until we got what everybody else got. That is land and the resources we need to survive and excel. If we don't establish that either on our own or with the help of others, then I think I'm at war the whole time.
Mm. Yeah, this is definitely something that I believe at some point we'll actually have to really have an in-depth discussion and define what black is. because we can't set guidelines for behavior when we haven't defined the participants. Who's included and who's excluded? We have to get to that point and we have to settle on definitive guidelines before we actually say this is the code that we have to stick to. And
Can
these
I
are,
ask you a question?
yes, sir.
Let me ask you, where where do you see this being done? That, meaning when I say this being done, where do you see folks that are ambiguously black, like we're not even sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
In any kind of large numbers, where it's becoming an issue to actually know who it is that's black? Like where is it like becoming kind of, man, this is like really hard to know what it is, to know what to do, how to position ourselves. For me right now, it's pretty simple. The issue with Drake, right? The issue of mixed people, stuff like that. Like a lot of them have gone into seeing themselves as biracials, um, because they got, simple. That's what they are. It's just, you got a parent over here of this nation and a parent over here of this nation, and I believe they simply have given up on the idea of which one to choose and said, well, fuck it, I'm biracial then. Okay. I don't think all of them don't want to identify as black. I think in some cases they've tried to identify themselves as black and felt some sort of rejection. I did not come up in the neighborhood where somebody half white was that there was a problem with them identifying as black. But evidently somewhere in this world, some places, people are experiencing some different things. And so, me, I'm sensitive to that. So, hey, they have to figure that out. Stuff is coming out now, dog, where, yeah, we do have to define some things. This wasn't a hard one for me because of where I grew up in DC. So everybody was black here until now. So it was without a question. It wasn't. We always was lumped up in the hood together, just like a lot of the inner cities throughout America. So it wasn't like a thing for me. But yeah, with you asking these questions, it lets me know that we got some stuff to take care of. There's some things we do have to do.
Oh, most definitely. I do agree that there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. Um, and even if we're present each other with all these questions, will there be a general consensus? Maybe, maybe not. We may never get to a point where we completely define what blackness is and who's included in the conversation, who's not. And I think part of the issue is that even within the black community, sure, there are individuals who may feel marginalized because they have one parent who's white, one parent who's black, or, maybe Hispanic or Asian, whatever. But also because the black community typically has placed individuals who display certain phenotypical characteristics on the pedestal. We hear terms like exotic, referring to racially ambiguous women. So if you're somebody who is perhaps biracial and you
Right.
see being considered exotic having resonance within the black community, then you would uh, you would probably be inclined to consider yourself biracial or exotic because that
Right.
elevates your standing within the black community. Because you're considered part of being black, but you're something different.
Right. Would you assign that to the ignorance of the community?
Hmm. I hate to say ignorance because I understand the actual reasoning behind it. I think is due in part
Okay.
to certain certain advantages to being racially ambiguous,
Right.
and I don't think it's intending to be malicious, but if you have an advantage that you're able to exercise, then you know, I don't see any reason why somebody wouldn't. Like if you can
So
if
as
you can benefit off of both, if you can benefit from being racially ambiguous, then I would imagine somebody would.
well, yeah, or it depends on their teaching, how they're raised, um, what they're raised to honor. I was raised to honor black ourselves. Um, so my standing, I'm pretty light skinned, bro. Um, I'm not biracial. There's some white lineage there, but and so I don't know how far that shit goes. You know what I'm saying? So if a great, I don't know if it's a great or great great grandparent is white, like how far does this shit go? Like I don't know. So far as I know, I've been accepted as a member of the black community. That's what I know myself to be. That's what it is for me. Um, but if we keep like digging and whatnot, and you start like I know some people starting to trace where their bloodline it goes back to. Now, what if I trace my bloodline or half of it? That's Europe. What if I'm 50% European or some shit like that somehow in the DNA? What at that point does it mean for me? I'm living from my black experience. You follow what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
my outlook, my views are shaped by the African American experience. So I'm racially classed as black, and I have experienced what it is that we have experienced. So I'm saying that is uh that's what qualifies me. Now, how deep does that go? There's some brothers out here, man. I've been in some crazy circles sometimes where they get so deep into the shit, man. If I stay around there, I don't know if I'm even black no more to some of these brothers. So um I don't know, man. This is some good shit. Excuse me. I never heard you really curse on your platform. I'm sorry, man.
Oh, no, no, no. It's all good. I do use profanity in my private life. I try to censor myself on YouTube because YouTube community guidelines. I don't know, sometimes where they, sometimes they may choose to enforce those community guidelines on certain individuals while they ease up on others. So I don't know where I fall in the continuum because I haven't pushed the issue yet. So I just try to be careful a little bit, but it's not like it offends me or anything like that because I speak like that all the time. But from my perspective, again, like when you start talking about percentages and things like that, DNA test and and what does that mean? Because very few people have actually gotten DNA tests percentage wise. So most people have perspectives on what their genetic makeup is, but they don't really know because they haven't actually got a DNA test to prove specifically where they're from and what percentages and what proportions of different ethnic groups they have in them. And maybe it's important, maybe it's not important. I don't know. But when you start to define who's black and exclude certain people saying, well, you're not black enough, you know, then I think that at that point the burden of proof is on you, and I don't know. I think that's a really in-depth conversation. And at some point, again, we'll have to address that as a collective and at
Yeah,
least get some sort of clarity on it. Because you may
this
have some
was
individuals, say for instance, you have somebody who's because you can have two people and say these two people are both 50% West African. That 50% can look very different in each one of those people. And you don't know they're 50% until you get a DNA test. Or you may have somebody who's 60% West African. Then you may have somebody who's 40% West African, but the 40% West African has those phenotypical characteristics that make them look more West African. Whereas the other person who's 60% West African, may still have some of the characteristics, but doesn't look quote unquote as black as the person who has a lower percentage of West African lineage in his bloodline.
Facts. In the meantime, do you consider this somewhat of a distraction? Like maybe if I was biracial, I would definitely have to be in some groups talking about this. But because I'm not, I see it as a distraction.
Well, I think it's pertinent because again, when we have issues like blackface, right? And see, now this goes real in depth. When you talk about percentages and constituencies of black people, some might argue that anybody who's Italian has Moorish blood in them. Now, I'm not saying they do, or I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying that in some groups, there's the belief that Italians have Moorish blood in them. So if, say, for instance, if I go back, say, for instance, you have a deserted island. You have 50 black people and 50 white people. And they start breeding and breeding and breeding and breeding. Then 100 generations down the line, are they black or are they white?
I think they can breed themselves out to become something else.
So we have groups, say for instance, like the Ethiopians, right? We understand that the Ethiopians, most of the Ethiopians you see today are products of non-black fathers. When we go back to generations when they were conquered, or when they were invaded, I'll say that, right? I'm
gonna have to run, Chris.
Okay. But anyways, we'll continue this conversation. I don't want to get too long-winded. It was just some things that I was pondering. And
okay.
But I appreciate you stopping by.
Oh yeah, no problem.
And again, everybody, that was Gab Talk Media, was on the check-in. Check out his channel, Gab Talk Media. Has some great content on there. Thank you everybody for joining me in the live chat. Again, I just wanted to just tackle this topic and kind of play devil's advocate here and just get some clarity. And if not get some clarity, just ask some questions for people to think about. Let's see here. I want to give some shout outs to people that joined me in the chat today. Again, thank you, CRU Reality. Thank you, Frogbox. Thank you, Angel Muniz. Gab Talk Media, of course. King Hebrew, always good to see you. Sheep Stay Sleep TV, thank you for joining me. Ken82 Draw, good to see you again. I see you got a new avatar. Vonda Harris, thank you for joining me. Always a pleasure to have you. DE Raptor, good to have you. Thank you for stopping by. Keisha, thank you for stopping by. And again, I just want to keep this one short and sweet. If anybody had any additional input, make sure you guys hit me up on my Instagram, _SuperTriz. If anybody wants to get in contact with me on Instagram, that's where you can reach me, _SuperTriz. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. And I'm out.